Today I'm going to talk about the dangers of not reverse dieting long enough, why you won't lose fat if you try too soon, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video because that's when I'll be covering how long you should reverse diet before you try to cut again. Hey, this is Colin DeWaay. If you want to master your metabolism and create forever results, start now by subscribing and make sure you click on that notification bell to make sure you don't miss any videos. Now, real quick, before I get started, I want to be clear, this video is not made for competitors, and none of my videos are. There's plenty of videos talking about reverse dieting out of a show and all that, but there's not a whole lot of information with regards to people like you, just the regular person who has more of an extreme history of yo-yo dieting and feels like their metabolism is tanked because of it. So anyway, the biggest thing you need to understand is the more times you diet, the more aggressively you diet, the more your body's going to become resistant to fat loss each and every time you go through this process. And this is why you may find yourself saying, I don't understand, I'm doing exactly what I did last time, but now I'm not seeing the same results. And the reason for this is because of all the hormonal and metabolic adaptations that do occur when you diet. The reason this happens is because your body's protecting itself against starvation. It's kind of like its own self-defense mechanism against it. If you think back to the early days when food was scarce, you never knew when your next meal was gonna come, and it could be a long time before you will get another meal, so the body needs to get good at storing the energy that you give it, because if it didn't, and you just kept losing fat at the same rate, you would starve to death really quick. So while I understand it's frustrating to have a hard time losing weight and to only watch it get harder and harder, you need to understand that it's just your body doing its job. It's protecting you. Your body doesn't care about how good you look. It doesn't care if you have a six-pack. It doesn't care about how well you fit into your dress. It doesn't care about any of that stuff. It cares about one thing, and that's survival, and it's going to do everything it can to make sure that happens. And nowadays, food isn't scarce at all. Not only is it really easy to get food at any time you want, but there's a lot of high-calorie, low-nutrient foods that are extremely cheap and easy to overeat on, and we can have it pretty much to our heart's content. We're in completely different times now. But just because we're in different times doesn't mean that your body's not going to still fight against starvation. So if you think about why the body still fights, well, if you constantly go back and forth between low calories and higher calories, the body's basically like, well, I never know when there's not going to be food around. Food is your energy supply. So if it thinks there's a lack of energy, or if it starts to notice this pattern, it's going to be hesitant to let its guard down, and it's still going to want to protect the energy supply you give it. So even though you may have stopped dieting and raised calories pretty fast and gained a lot of weight quickly, that doesn't mean the body's let its guard down yet, and you've probably noticed this over time about how each time you come back to diet, it gets harder and harder and harder, and this is why. You're constantly teaching it that food is scarce. So this is why if you don't reverse diet long enough and give it plenty of time for the body to adapt to these higher calories, get your hormones and metabolism back into a good place before starting to cut again, you run a high risk of not being able to lose fat when you do drop your calories again. And when this happens, that's pretty mentally defeating, especially if you've gone through the reverse diet process for a while, but didn't wait long enough, drop your calories, nothing happens, you get demoralized and think, well, what's the point? And then this kind of brings you right back into the yo-yo dieting mentality that's an absolute disaster. So that's always something to consider while you're reverse dieting and you're thinking about how you want to lose weight and jump back into a cut now. If you do it too soon and your body doesn't respond, you're gonna undo all the progress you made through that reverse diet, and you're gonna have to start over from square one. And that is just like a gut punch, and you wanna make sure that's not happening. I don't want that to happen for you. I know you don't want that to happen, so you have to stay patient. It is so important for this entire process as a whole, this entire lifestyle, everything we're doing. Patience is arguably the most important thing, and it's so important to remember you have your whole life ahead of you. There's no reason to rush the process, and in fact, rushing the process is the very thing that's gotten you into this mess, and continuing to do that is only going to make things worse. Please, please, please think big picture. Focus on all the many positives that come from reverse dieting. The fact that you get to feel better, perform better, have more energy, sleep better, get to enjoy more food, have more balance and flexibility in your life. All these things that you're gonna miss when it's time to cut again, make sure you're enjoying them, because I promise when you do cut again, you're gonna miss those things, and you don't wanna get caught in the grass is always greener mentality, because at that point, then you're pretty much never happy no matter what you're doing. So please don't get any of that wrong. Like, I completely understand it. I understand it's frustrating, and I know you want faster results. We all want fast results, but at some point, you have to understand that it's not working, and you have to play the long game if you want to finally win. Okay, getting into how long you should reverse diet before going into another cut. First, I'm going to make some assumptions that you have a history of yo-yo dieting here. And for the purposes of this video, yo-yo dieting is basically going through periods of typically crash diets followed by completely giving up, drastically overeating, gaining a lot of weight quickly, and then jumping back into a diet again, and kind of repeating that pattern over and over. And just so you know, I'm gonna do a video soon kind of explaining the difference between yo-yo dieting and reverse dieting and then losing weight, because some people are asking that question lately, like what's the difference? In both scenarios, you gain some weight, only to lose some weight, and there's an extreme difference, but I wanna save that for a separate video, so if you're not subscribed, make sure you do so to make sure you don't miss that video. Also, for simplicity's sake, when I give you these time frames coming up, understand that I'm taking reverse diet time as both the time that you're increasing calories during the reverse, as well as holding those higher calories and kind of combining that all together, because you're not going to just be increasing calories the entire time. If you do that, eventually you'll get to a point where your body just can't handle it and you'll gain weight way too fast. So you will get to a point where you're just kind of roughly holding those higher calories and roughly kind of maintaining maybe small surplus, but you definitely don't want to make the mistake of just getting your calories to a certain point, getting them high, and then immediately cutting them because your calories got up. Your body needs time to adapt, and if it doesn't, it's not going to work. And that's why I recommend these time frames. But understand, this is just kind of a generalization. It's not a perfect set in stone kind of way for everyone to do it. Everyone responds a little bit different, and this isn't an exact science. It's just kind of what I've noticed over time in working with hundreds of people now, what tends to be safer and work well depending on your personal history. So with that all said, if you have a history of yo-yo dieting that's about 2 to 5 years long, I recommend reverse dieting at least 6 months to a year before thinking about cutting again. And I always want to stress, when I say minimum, that is minimum. And there's risk involved in cutting too soon. We've already talked about that. So I encourage you to wait as long as you can before doing it. And you don't have to stop at 6 months or 9 months or even a year. You can reverse diet as long as you want. And the longer you reverse diet and keep your calories high, the better off you're going to be, the more adapted your body's going to be, and the safer it's going to be to return. So definitely stay patient, but somewhere between 6 to 12 months is usually going to be long enough for most people with only kind of a shorter yo-yo dieting history. Now, if you're someone who has a longer history, maybe between about 5 and 10 years, then I recommend reverse dieting at least 9 months up to 15 months or more. Again, can't go too long, but at least that 9 months to make sure you give your body plenty of time to adapt. And then if you have an extremely long history, over a decade, 10 plus years, then you want to give it plenty of time. Your body at this point is so used to calories going up, down, all over the place, and it's fighting you hard. And if you don't give it time, you're really going to struggle. So I definitely recommend in that scenario, going at least a year of a reverse before cutting again. And if you can go like a year and a half or even more, hey, the better off you're going to be. You might hear that and get very upset. Some people literally like almost yell at me through words on YouTube that you have to do it that long. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I'm not trying to be mean, and I'm not trying to be demotivating. I'm just trying to be real with you and tell you, hey, this is what probably needs to happen. And I can't tell you how many times I've told people you need to give yourself more time. When they ask, they don't listen. They try to cut too soon. Body doesn't respond. They have to start all over again and they get really frustrated. And again, you got your whole life. Like, you don't have to rush this. And this is such a good opportunity to take time to not only focus on those positives, but also create a better relationship with food, with your body, with the process as a whole, because you can't do that if you're just constantly dieting all the time. Now, you may be wondering, maybe you don't have a history of yo-yo dieting and you're just finishing your cut and now you want to reverse diet again, and you're wondering, okay, when can I go back to cut again in that scenario? At that point, the minimum is however long you dieted. So if you dieted for 4 months, you want to reverse for at least 4 months. 6 months dieting, 6 months reverse dieting. Again, that's the minimum. Preferably, I like to get at least 2 times that whenever possible, just to really make sure you're in a good place. And the more time you're spending out of a diet, again, the better off you're going to be, especially in the long term. So if you can go 2, 3, even 4 times as long, then fantastic. Okay, I understand that you might be scared to reverse diet. You don't want to gain weight. You're uncomfortable the way you are now. Mentally, you have a hard time with it. So it can be difficult to get started. And if that's you, then I strongly encourage you to check out this top video next to hopefully help you get over some of those fears and do what you know is best for yourself in the long run. Otherwise, I think you'll like this bottom video instead. And I'll see you next time.